Hello, my dear students. Hope all of you all are working really hard to score your stars. So, today's session, we are going to concentrate on ventilation. Now, I'm sure all of you all know what is ventilation. Ventilation comprises of two processes, inhalation and exhalation. Now, please do not get confused with respiration. Ventilation, or you can also say breathing, in simple terms, breathing. Okay, so breathing or ventilation comprises of two processes, inhalation and exhalation. Do not get confused with respiration is an entirely different process, although it's a part of the respiratory system. Respiratory system has three main processes that you need to learn in respiratory, when you learn the chapter respiration, whether it is NIOS students or IGCSE students, or it could be CBSE. They are supposed to learn in the respiration chapter. They are supposed to learn the three main processes, that is respiration, there is gas exchange, and of course there is breathing. So these are three different processes that are happening, and usually students get confused with what between breathing and respiration. So both are different processes. Respiration is a process which is chemically, where the chemicals are involved. What are the chemicals that are involved in respiration? You have glucose, C6H12O6, glucose, which is oxidized by 6 molecules of oxygen, and it releases 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and also 6 molecules of water. But in this process, there's a lot of energy released. And of course, there are a lot of enzymes involved. And since it's a chemical reaction, it's a reaction where enzymes are involved and chemicals are involved. It's a chemical reaction. It's a chemical reaction. Whereas breathing is just a physical process where gases enter and gases move out. Inhalation, exhalation. But if you talk about gas exchange, that's another process where at the gas exchange surface, that is the alveolus. I'm sure you'd have seen this diagram, there, and the blood capillary, there is exchange of gases happening at this level. So that's a different process. Today what we are going to do is we are going to learn about breathing. Okay, and breathing is of two processes. It comprises of two processes, which is inhalation and exhalation. So that is what is all about breathing. Okay, now when we talk about breathing, we also need to understand the different parts that are involved. Now, I think you all know this. The nose, that's a funny nose, but it's okay. So from the nose, the nasal cavity, this is the nasal cavity, you have the trachea, and from the trachea you have the bronchi, then the bronchioles. Okay, and then you have the lungs. Of course, these lungs are covered, are protected by the rib cage, 12 pairs of rib cage, 12 pairs of ribs. They are protected by, and of course you know this, I'm sure the ribs are all connected by muscles, and those muscles are nothing but the intercostal muscles, external and internal. Okay, and apart from that, what you need to know is that sheet which is just in this abdomen. This is the thoracic cavity. This is the thorax, the thoracic cavity. Okay, and below that we have the abdomen. Below that we have the abdomen. So in the abdomen you have the diaphragm. This is the diaphragm. Its original shape is like a dome. So diaphragm is dome shaped. Okay, now let's look at what actually happens in these structures. So it is a process. It is a process where you have the diaphragm. This is the diaphragm. Okay, this is the original shape of the diaphragm. And when you talk about the diaphragm, and just above that, okay, let me take an draw another diagram, maybe like this. You have the lungs. So these are the lungs. Okay, and you have the diaphragm. Okay, when now this is the diaphragm. Its original shape is like a dome, and then you have the rib cage. This is the rib cage. So here you have the rib cage. Now what happens is, okay, now during breathing in, now we are going to talk about breathing in. Now, what happens? Breathing in is also called inhalation or inspiration. These are different words that are used. So, now while breathing in, if you see the what happens during breathing in, this is the diaphragm. Now, as I told you, diaphragm is dome shaped, but when breathing in, for the process, when it contracts, so this is the diaphragm. I'll use the letter D. So when diaphragm contracts, okay, and you have the intercostal muscles here, especially the external intercostal muscles which are connected to the ribs. Okay, the blue line that you see are the ribs. So let's say the external intercostal muscles, and when the diaphragm contracts, the rib cage is pulled up. So this is the rib cage. Now what happens to the rib cage? The rib cage is pulled up. And who is pulling it up? It's the external intercostal muscles which are connected to the ribs, which are pulling it up. And when they contract, the diaphragm flattens. See, you see, it's not a dome shape now, it's a complete flat thing. The rib cage is pulled up. And when the rib cage is pulled up, as I told you, this part is the thoracic cavity. So this thoracic cavity, okay, TC, I'll just put it as TC. So this thoracic cavity, the volume of the thoracic cavity increases. It increases. Now I think you should be knowing this. When the volume increases, what happens to the pressure? The pressure decreases. So when the volume increases, pressure decreases. And let me just revise the diffusion, the definition for diffusion. So what happens during diffusion? Molecules move from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. So this is how it is. Molecules always move, and it is the same for temperature, pressure. Wherever you have pressure, also moves from a higher pressure level to a lower pressure level. So now if you see in this diagram where we saw the lungs, which where the thoracic cavity has increased. So pressure inside, pressure inside, okay, inside is now lesser than the pressure outside. Okay, so pressure inside is less. Okay, let me put PR if you are not. So pressure inside the lungs, inside the thoracic cavity, is considerably lesser when compared to the air outside. So what happens? Air is drawn in. Air is forced into the thoracic, into the lungs. Okay, so let me do this again. So what happens is, you have the lungs here, you have the rib cage which is held by the intercostal muscles, and you have the diaphragm. So when the diaphragm contracts, now this diaphragm becomes flat. Now this is flat, it's becoming flat like this. So when it becomes flat, it actually contracts, and it is, so diaphragm and external intercostal muscles contract, and what happens is they increase the volume. volume increases and the pressure decreases. So when the pressure decreases, and when you compare the pressure that is outside in the air, you have the air which is forced in, which is drawn in. So pressure inside the thorax decreases, so air is drawn in. So here I've just written a mnemonic for you all, DESI, which is usually used for inhalation. So diaphragm, so this is D for diaphragm, E for external intercostal muscles. When they contract, what happens? Inhalation happens, DESI. But you need to add on all the, the fillers there. What are the fillers? When the diaphragm and the external intercostal muscle contract, the rib cage is raised up. The rib cage is raised up. So when the rib cage is raised up and out, you have the volume which of the thoracic cavity which increases and the pressure inside decreases. So when the pressure decreases, air is drawn in. So you can use the mnemonic DESI. So let's take the opposite now. What is the opposite for exhalation? For exhalation. Exhalation, it is the opposite. So here what happens is the lungs are there, you have the diaphragm which contracts, which become dome shaped, and when it contracts, what happens to the external intercostal muscles? They too relax actually. The rib cage comes down. It comes down and it reduces the volume. So volume decreases, pressure increases, and because of the difference in the pressure, air is forced out. That's exhalation. So this is a simple process of breathing in and breathing out. You may see these terms, inhalation, exhalation. You may see inspiration, expiration. So both are the same. Breathing out, expiration or exhalation, everything is going to be the same. So do not get confused. See, the whole thing is about the sequence. Sequence is very important. You have to know the sequence. Children tend to get, they feel that when air goes in, lungs are expanding. No, you have to say that external intercostal muscles, they are relaxing. So external intercostal muscles relax. What happens to the rib cage? Rib cage moves down, it goes down. Then you have diaphragm. What happens to the diaphragm? Diaphragm is also relaxing. And then you have the volume. What happens to the volume? It decreases. The volume decreases. Volume of what? Volume of the thoracic cavity decreases. And then you have, because of this decrease, the pressure increases. Pressure increases, and because of this, air is forced out. And that's exhalation. And that's exhalation. So either you do this or you can simply use the mnemonic DESI to learn the whole process of inhalation and exhalation. So I repeat, diaphragm and external intercostal muscle contracts and volume increases, pressure decreases, air is forced in during inhalation. So that's it for today. So for more videos, please do subscribe to my channel, and you will definitely